And so we have the experience of that first Gulf War where there's a problem, but you can't identify exactly what it is. What we have are these young men and women coming back who may not necessarily suffered a traumatic blow to the brain, but because bombs nowadays, unfortunately, are so much, there's so much more explosions that go into them, concussions can occur, many feet, many yards away from the actual explosion itself. And so now we're seeing people that may have been within the sound range actually getting some type of physical trauma. Then there are those, obviously, who have not been within the sound range that are coming back with that type of a trauma, too. And so we have to deal with that, and there are a number of programs that are out there. State of Illinois actually now is in the leadership, one of the leadership states, along with Minnesota. A young man from Freeport, Illinois, who took his own life, Timothy Bowman. In fact, I talked to his father, Mike, yesterday, and the crusade that his parents have been putting on to try to bring to the attention, especially those kids in the Guard, the fact that there are some kids with real problems coming home. They come home, the kids are laughing and smiling, and they're just so grateful to be home from doing their duty in Iraq. And John, no one knows there's a problem. The parents had no idea that Timothy was having this problem, and the young man took his own life. The problem is, how do we work with these young men and women coming back from Iraq? I don't want to use the word screen because that's too cold. But how do we work with them to make sure that everything is okay? That services, there's an abundance of services that are necessary for counseling, et cetera. So we have the hotline in Illinois. We just keep on working on that issue.
Yeah, Director Duckworth was very instrumental in a lot of these things.
She's done a super job on that.
The U.S. Department of Labor has a TAPS program, the U.S. Department of Labor vets, when they do get discharged or released from active duty. I hope that has a lot of success, and the work that you've done will certainly help that be successful. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs right now has the largest budget ever, and it should. And as time goes on, it will continue to grow, I'm sure. There's a big push around the country through not just veterans organizations, but even Senator Clinton signed in New York a resolution for mandatory line item funding for VA medical. Pat Quinn here in the state of Illinois pushed for that in Cook County. In fact, I think it was on 23 counties' primary ballot to have mandatory line item funding for VA medical. I know that there's drawbacks to that, and I know that there are good reasons for it. I've never spoken to anybody in Congress about it. So what is a congressman's view or your congressman's view?
Well, John, here, the basic issue is Congress providing enough money and services to take care of the veteran? Now, and you could do that in two ways. You could make that an entitlement, which means that the program grows on its own. Or you could make that discretionary, which means that members of Congress have to be very astute and monitor what's going on with the veterans and listen to them very carefully and be able to tend to their needs. Let me give you 3 examples of what would happen if we had so-called mandatory spending. I helped open up the McHenry County office for veterans. In fact, I would never forget, it's the day my mother passed away. How do you forget a day like that? But we were there at the open house, and it was great. We got the phone call, and Mom passed away in 2000. I helped open up the Veterans Clinic in Rockford, and also set up with Rockford College the program, Rockford Medical School, the program for the veterans who could not be serviced in a hurry, and then they would go to the Rockford School of Medicine. We still have that program, that in case there's a surge of services requested, then the School of Medicine picks that up, and then I worked and actually opened up the Veterans Clinic in Stevenson County in Freeport. That's just one member of Congress who's listening to the hearts of the people he represents. You couldn't have stuff like that happen if everybody in Washington ran the show, if one bureaucrat in Washington decided who would get the different clinics. And when we know that there's a need for these clinics and we go to work on it and we could show demographically the huge number of veterans that are in a particular area, then the VA says, well, yeah, let's work that into our program. You wouldn't have that discretion. You wouldn't have those options available if spending became mandatory. It just would not happen. So I'm opposed to it because I want to be responsible to that veteran. I don't want to have some sterile department say, we have the responsibility, Congressman, it's no longer any of your business.
Well, I can see how one person as the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs having that control would be a stumbling block
It would,
at the very least.
And I don't think that that's the Secretary of Veterans Affairs wants that issue. In fact, we talked to the #2 man at Veterans Affairs, went over there, and there was a problem going on with some contracts at the Rockford School of Medicine. Not a problem, we just wanted to figure it out at Rockford School of Medicine and at VA. And because they're not locked into these rigid rules, we were able to work it out in a hurry. Now, what would happen if you had a one-size-fits-all program where the member of Congress could not intervene on behalf of his veterans? I don't want to do that to the veterans that I represent.
It's nice to have that point of view.
Well, that's why.
One more question before I let you go back to your busy schedule. With the protection of our borders, it is working now to an extent. The fence is going up in places. It's very important. Everybody I know shares your opinion on this, but I don't know everybody in the world, or I'd convince them. But protecting our borders, at least the people in our country, why was that so difficult? Why was it such a tedious task in Washington to have that be such an important issue? Well,
as much as I respect and love the president, President Bush, and it actually, the problem has been there all along. The presidents have never really taken border security that seriously. And each year, at least 900,000 people come across the borders. It's not just Mexico. There are illegal Chinese coming in through Tortuga, the old pirate island, in the Caribbean, and other points in the United States, especially in Florida. We cannot begin to secure the homeland unless we can secure our borders. It's got to start there. And 20 to 25% of the people that are in federal prisons are illegal aliens. I mean, it's that simple. You could get rid of a quarter of the federal prisoners if you just seal the borders. Here in McHenry County, we have the unfortunate situation where some fella has been deported, I think, 3 or 4 times. He's killed 2 people here in vehicular homicide because he came here and got drunk. Now, that's wrong for everybody. But if people were kept out of the country and were forced to obey the laws of immigration, you wouldn't have these people coming up here and committing crimes. And John, obviously I'm not saying that just because a person speaks with an accent that he's a criminal. I'm not saying that. I mean, my mother spoke with an accent before she learned English from the Irishman who lived next door to her in the little Italian village in Rockford, Illinois, where she was born. But what we're seeing is that there are a lot of criminals that are coming across the border illegally. And obviously under immigration laws, if they're followed, strictly adhered to, and if the borders are sealed, there's no way a criminal can ever come to the United States legally.
Well, Congressman Manzullo,
thanks, John.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
He's been introduced as the working man's working man, Congressman Don Manzullo, the veteran's working man.